History of Steeltown. In the 1800s, the Hamilton Harbor was one of the main attractions of the city. This all changed in 1912 when the federal government passed the Hamilton Harbor's Commissioners Act. Stelco and Dofasco, two up-and-coming industrial steel companies, benefited from this as they were allowed to fill the water with slag, a byproduct of the steelmaking process. When the First World War broke out, the steel industries were primary producers of artillery shells in Canada. In the 1930s, the Great Depression affected the production of both companies. The Second World War began in 1939, and both companies produced shells and steels for the building of ships. Afterwards, there was a period of increased manufacturing. This lasted until the 1970s, where the expansion of the bay to the east side caused an outrage in the city. In the midst of this crisis, people started to become aware of the fact that the bay had become heavily polluted. In the following decades, the steel industry faced a slow decline. Stelco and Dofasco were bought out in the late 2000s.
5 major pollutants of concern in Hamilton Steeltown consist of polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, which are benzene and benzo(A)-pyrene, sulfur dioxide, nitrogen oxide, typically nitrogen dioxide, total suspended particles, and total reduced sulfur compounds. These contaminants are all contributions of the coke oven smelting. This is where the coal is processed to produce pure carbon to manufacture steel. From this process, these various contaminants are emitted into the atmosphere as the byproduct.
Alright, so these are going to be the health effects that have come from Dofasco or the steeltown industry in Hamilton. So in 2008, Dofasco actually produced 81% of the city's emissions, which are composed of benzene and BAP. And benzene and BAP are actually found in the common cigarette. So that's also equated to what the steeltown industry is putting out. And a study was found that for lung cancer, the risk of death was actually 1.10% for Hamilton workers. And pollutants are actually carried 1,000 miles from oceans and to land, and that is called transboundary pollution. And benzene is problematic in chronic low-dose scenarios. Therefore, due to the companies actually producing so much amounts of benzene and BAP, we're actually creating much more of a risk or health risk for citizens in Hamilton.
Hamilton's steel industry was built such that many of its main buildings in the north end of Hamilton stood on reclaimed or infilled land, which harmed the drainage system of Hamilton and the water ecology of Hamilton Harbor. There have also been several lawsuits in the history of Hamilton Steel, the most memorable one being in 2012, which led the Canadian government to announce funding to clean up the contaminated sediment at Randall Reef in Hamilton Harbor. A solution might be to scope out appropriate sites for factories or use sustainable strategies to maintain trees, greens with strong root holdings to lengthen or prevent erosion into water.
So Stelco, if it ever shut down, is that sustainable? 143 employees will lose their job, 15,000 pensioners will have their pensions risked, $1.4 million in yearly education taxes, no more, $1.9 million in property taxes, no more, $2 million in sewer taxes, no more, and $22.3 million in unpaid bills. Well, is that sustainable if Hamilton is going to take such a hit because of this? So what can Stelco do? Well, recent talks have been to sell their land. One of the buyers is Hamilton Port Authority, which they claim that they have a market to buy the extra land from Stelco to create a new industry of ports.
Randall's Reef, Hamilton, Ontario, situated around Lake Ontario. Or no one bothered to pay attention where large industries dump most of their toxic sludge waste. It is confirmed that industries are behind this mess, and presume that the tar pool subsisted since the rise of the steel and energy industry. Now there's a cleanup project underway to restore the 7.5-hectare reef to its former glory. An estimated $140 million cleanup will take action soon. The sustainable plan for cleanup consists of dumping the sludge into a large steel box, which would then be capped and used as a shipping pier. From the harbor cleanup, Hamiltonians can learn various different ways to prevent a disaster similar to this from appearing, as well as suggesting investing in ways for a better industry cleanup and technology to improve Hamilton's pollution.